All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Irrigation Orientation. My name is Yiling Zhuang. I'm the Water Resources Regional Specialized Agent in UF-IFAS Extension. I'm housed in Mid-Florida Research and Education Center, which is located in Apopka. So we are the center of horticulture sciences. If you haven't visited us, I highly encourage you just to stop by. Not really the right word to say that, because a stop by probably you won't see anything. But Central Florida, it's we have a lot of nurseries. That's also why our center is located there. And this series, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's the irrigation orientation. If Tina, you can move to the next slide. So you can see we have a whole series, a whole different range of different topics lined up for this series. And we are getting close to the end of this series. We've covered like Florida's water overview and tell you how, teach you how to water according to plants' needs and some best practices with their irrigation system and the lawn care. And we also cover the reclaimed water, what we should do and what we should not do. Last 2 weeks, we dive into turf grass, two very common turf grass in Florida. One is soil shale grass, another is St. Augustine grass. We gave you some tips how to maintain these turf grasses. So if you miss these topics, you can send me an email. I can share the link to the recording to you. And I also want to let you know we are building a web page to house all the recordings and the educational materials. I will put a link in the chat box later. So it will be housed in MREC. So we are very close to finish building the web page, so please stay tuned. I will say around September we'll launch our web page. And today is microirrigation. During the whole series, we touch on microirrigation so many times. So today we finally got a chance to dive into what is microirrigation and how, like those do's and the don'ts about microirrigation. And I have the pleasure to introduce our guest speaker here is Ms. Tina McIntyre. She is the Florida-friendly landscaping agent in UF-IFAS Extension, Seminole County. We also have the pleasure to have Mr. Abraham Vance Carnes. I got it. He is the water conservation coordinator in Seminole County Environmental Services. They will give us a talk about microirrigation. Now, Tina and Abraham, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elin. I appreciate you having us today. And so, yeah, we're located in Seminole County. That's Orlando North, for those of you that are not familiar with where we're located, just north of Orlando. And like she said, I'm the Florida Friendly Landscaping Agent with UF-IFAS Extension. And I wanted to do this with our buddies over at Seminole County Environmental Services. And so I invited Abraham to come and dive into microirrigation. So without further ado, we will get started. So just a quick overview of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, that this is actually in Florida law. It is the 9 principles that support the program, and it's brought to you by the UF-IFAS Extension in partnership with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and counties all across the state and utility partners and things like that. And so we use these Florida Friendly principles to really teach programs and conserve water and also protect our water bodies and our surface waters around the state. So it all starts with right plant in the right place. And it was great that Yulin in this wonderful series has already covered St. Augustine grass and other types of turf and plants so that we can know how to put that right plant in the right place. But today we're really going to be focusing on watering efficiently, which is, as we'll see, beneficial for our plants, but also for our environment. And then the other 9 principles, just to briefly cover these, and I offer programming in each one of them, is fertilizing appropriately, mulch, attracting wildlife, managing yard pests responsibly, recycling that yard waste, reducing stormwater runoff, and protecting the waterfront. And these are all really important to have a healthy landscape, but also protect our waterways. So you might say, well, why is micro irrigation important? Well, 50% of our water usage actually comes from outdoor irrigation. When we're talking about water conservation and saving water and looking at our water bills, right? We all pay those. That targeting the irrigation in our landscapes is really going to be the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak. So we want to make sure that we're using the water outside most efficiently. Don't get me wrong, the inside stuff is important too, where we're turning off the water when we're brushing our teeth and all that. But outdoor, we use a lot more water. And so a little bit of savings can go a long way. Your landscape still needs water to prevent loss. So, we do recognize that we want to keep our plants alive during droughts. We need to be able to use water, either hand watering irrigation, micro irrigation, to prevent loss of our plants. And then you use less water while still meeting your landscape needs, helping to preserve that Floridian aquifer. So, really micro irrigation is where it's at, and it's definitely the future of landscaping. So again, just looking at that piece of the pie, 50 to 60% again goes towards our outdoor turf, landscapes, fruit trees, everything. And so if we can shave a little bit off of that big wedge, we're going to be saving a lot of water. Dishwashers, different things like that. And as we become more energy and water efficient in our appliances, again, targeting that outdoor area is really important. And the other thing is that we continue to grow here in Central Florida and throughout the state. We are seeing rapid urbanization. If you drive along any of the interstates, I-4, I-75, I-95, you're going to be seeing lots of development and construction of commercial and residential buildings. And so when we look at the state in 2010, you have to a study where they're actually projecting out what our state urban areas and conservation areas are going to look like as we go out into the future. And you can see that if nothing changes through 2070, we are going to have a lot more urban space, or developed space, which is denoted here in red. If alternative and changes are made, we're still going to see a high increase in developed area. And you might say, well, Tina, why does this matter to water? Well, we all use water, right? We even just for drinking, but if we're all having lawns and things like that, and our aquifer only has so much water in it. And so it's really important that we think about these overarching pictures and select for that micro irrigation. So the Central Florida Water Initiative is a group of state agencies, water management district, utility companies, like we have Abraham as our guest today. And they all come together to research and create policy and to basically protect our water and be able to have a water supply for our future and as we develop. And so they have some predictions, and they're always kind of recalibrating and reassessing these things. But they put out this graphic which shows that the consumption as we go into 2035, we are seeing that we will have enough water here in blue to meet that demand of 800 million gallons per day, which is projected. We can get an additional 50 million gallons per day in the aquifer, but there's about 250 million gallons per day that we're going to fall short of by 2035. And again, this is projections of what the aquifer will have in it over, how much we're going to be growing. And so that's not nothing. 250 million gallons per day is quite a bit of water. And so when we're talking about conservation, that is really where it's at. And so micro irrigation and having efficient water in our yards, using those rain sensors, and again, providing irrigation as a supplement to our rain. We are rich here in rainfall, especially this time of year. And so getting those rain barrels out and, using the rain to your advantage, and then switching on the irrigation when we really truly need it. So just to cover some quick ins and outs, and again, we are here in Seminole County with the St. Johns River Water Management District. encourage you to look at your local water management district and your local Florida, regulations for the county or the management district. But by law in the state of Florida, everyone must test operation of each device in the system. This is universal throughout Florida, must install new ones or repair existing ones, and confirm proper operating condition. So, if there's a leak or, an inefficiency in the system, it is your responsibility to make sure that it gets fixed and that we're not just carelessly losing the water. And then something else to keep in mind, which micro irrigation is actually exempt from this specific regulation. And again, this is specific to St. Johns River, so check your local area. But for our area, it's even addresses can water this time of year, April through October, 2 days a week. And the dry season or the winter part of Florida is 1 day a week. And so, just adhering to those. Now, one reason why you would want to grab for micro irrigation is because, again, they're exempt in our district for those rules and regulations. So you can water at your convenience with micro irrigation. I think most of the water management districts adopt that as an exception too, but check locally. You can, again, irrigate as a supplement to the rain. This is really an important way to think about our irrigation, and it's to the benefit of your plants. So we're saying this not only for conservation, but because we have a turf grass diagnostic clinic here in our Seminole County office, and we see things all the time, landscaping plants and turf, things that come in because they're over irrigated. And so we definitely want to use the rain gauge and check our local weather apps so that we know how much rain that we're getting. And then, switch your mentality to thinking about that as the primary method of irrigation, and that rainfall is the first step. And then, just to give you some averages here, if you look at the map, I know it looks like a tie-dye t-shirt, but to just kind of break it down a little bit for you, this is the average precipitation in the state of Florida for 2019. And so you can see us here just north of Orlando in Seminole County, and you can kind of squint to find your little part of the state. But we're generally about, 60 to 70 inches of rainfall per year. Now, plants generally need about 1 inch of rain or water per week. So if we say, in general, we have 60 inches, and how many weeks do we have? We have about 52 weeks in a year. That's going to be about 1 inch a week. So the rain really does provide us just about enough. Now, the problem is we get a lot of that rain this time of year. So we want to, again, use that rain to our advantage. But, it does show that we do have a lot of rain here to be able to utilize. And then again, think about those plants. What are we irrigating? Is it turf? Is it vegetables? Is it established plants? These are all going to vary in their needs for irrigation. A lot of our established plants, so we just created this, this kind of a prequel to our forthcoming publication that I'm working with for a team of Florida Friendly Landscaping team that we're creating this publication. It's not yet available, but I'm showing it to you today because it really does, tie in. Or if we are looking at established perennials, and this is really targeting for edibles. So those of you that are interested in edibles, we're looking at relative water need being very low, and the frequency to establishment is medium. And so pretty rapidly, we can taper off the water that's needed. Something like a microgreen, or if we're sprouting our own seeds, that's a high water need, and we're needing to do it for a while until they can get established. But other things like our established trees, our established shrubs, fruit trees, they're very low water needs. And again, they're going to establish fairly quickly, and they're able to taper off with that. So just keep that in mind as you think about your landscape design. Think about your primary plants. Do you have a lot of shrubs? Do you have a lot of trees? Maybe you have a lot of turf. And that's going to adjust, how much you need to put into the landscape. So now I'm going to invite Abraham to kind of walk us through what is micro irrigation and kind of the ins and outs and the details of that.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina. So basically, jump into the nitty-gritty of microirrigation. Microirrigation is a method of irrigation that waters directly to the roots of plants. And they do this method, or it does this method by using low flow delivery, but using distribution tubing, emitters, drip gauges, stuff like that. And we'll go more into detail as we go through the slides. But one of the cool things about microirrigation is, especially coming from a utility perspective, you can use less water, which will result in having a lower water bill. It's around 20 to 50% of less water that you're using. And just as Tina mentioned earlier, with outdoor water consumption being the most usage that you do in a household, not to shy away from indoor use, it can definitely do a lot of an impact when you're switching up from irrigation to micro irrigation. Also, it's slower and longer than regular sprinklers, which also helps reduce evaporation and runoff. Because I'm sure, as a lot of you have noticed, when it comes to regular irrigation systems, sometimes when it's a little bit unobserved and not really staying on top of it, you see a lot of that runoff being thrown onto the street and or sidewalks. And that kind of constitutes to a lot of consumption that's not being utilized, and that gets wasted in evaporation or in runoff. We definitely want to do our part to try to save as much water as we can. And then to the next slide. So right here, when it comes to micro irrigation versus regular irrigation, sprays and rotors apply more gallons per minute than micro irrigation emitters. So it's such an example right here. Micro irrigation emitters have a flow rate of about half a gallon per minute, in contrast to the traditional spray and rotors, which can do about 3 gallons per minute. Now, one thing to keep in mind when it comes to these types of irrigation systems is you can't mix and match both systems, because you want to try to target exactly what you're trying to do with your landscape. Are you trying to water your flower bed, your garden, your trees? So things like this require a specific approach to micro irrigation, and you can't really mix and match with your regular irrigation system that you have. So some of the benefits of micro irrigation: minimizes pest problems such as weeds and diseases, gives you flexibility in meeting variable water needs of new, maturing, and established plants. Adaptable and changeable over time, microsystems can be easily expanded to irrigate additional plants. So one thing that I think is really cool about micro irrigation here is you can, especially with the flexibility of depending what kind of distribution system that you use, you can always add on to it and expand your landscape. So if you've got some more Florida-friendly landscape, plants that you like to add in, you can go ahead and do so and still implement within your micro irrigation system at a minimal cost. So that's food for thought as well. Emitters can be simply exchanged or removed. Emitter lines can be eliminated or repositioned. So kind of tying into that flexibility of growing within your micro irrigation system, emitters can be changed out, moved about, and give you that flexibility to do as you will with your micro irrigation system.
Yeah, I know, Abraham, I've seen lots of landscapes, plants change form over time, and when a shrub grows, it's difficult to, have that irrigation adapt with it unless you go out there and change it. And I know with micro, it's so easy to just move them around, where when it's piped into the ground, it's not as easy to adjust around those growing plants.
Absolutely. So one huge aspect when it comes to all irrigation systems is your irrigation controller. Definitely, irrigation controllers manage the duration and frequency of your watering cycles. And when properly set, an irrigation controller can make system operation easier and help prevent overwatering. So one of the things when it comes to water conservation and being smart when it comes to watering your irrigation or your landscape utilizing irrigation controller is you want to be aware and stay on top of your irrigation controller and make sure that you're going along with the proper rainfall that we're receiving. So kind of what Tina mentioned, if you kind of see that it's raining, don't be afraid to go over to your irrigation controller and stop that cycle for the day, especially if you know it's a day that your irrigation controller is going to run, because that can save you a lot of water and help you with your utility bill when it comes to saving a little bit of water/money. So irrigation controller is pretty much the brain of the operation, huge aspect when it comes to micro irrigation and or irrigation as a whole. And another important part of irrigation systems is you have to have that backflow preventer. It's required on all systems attached to a public drinking water system. It's installed after the point of connection. It prevents contamination, and if a timer is used, the timer must always be installed first. Then this is followed by the backflow valve. So it's really important to have this installed, as it is required for all public drinking water systems to prevent any of that issues that you might have when it comes to your irrigation or micro irrigation system. Another important part here is filters. So I do understand that when it comes to micro irrigation systems, there might be some deposits that are formed in the emitters, especially. Filters do a huge part in helping prevent that. It removes particles and helps prevent clogging. I definitely want to install before the pressure regulator for easy maintenance. Filters should be selected based on the emitter flow rate. So you definitely want to look at what flow rate your emitter has and then match the type of filter to go along with it. So the higher the mesh filter number, the smaller the size of the particles captured by the filter. So as you can see here, we have an examples. 200 mesh can match up to 75 microns for 0.5 gallons per hour emitters, 150 to 100, 120 to 125, and it all depends, of course, on the larger emitters and what flow the emitters are giving off. So ranging from even half a gallon per hour all the way to 1 gallon per hour.
Yeah, and I've seen filters are particularly important for micro because we do have such tiny little spray heads where rotors are putting out a higher volume of water. And so something so tiny is not going to be such a problem. But with micro, because it's all such smaller scale, the filters really do help keep the system flowing and going.
Absolutely. So this is actually something that when I first got into the irrigation industry, kind of schooling myself up, I thought it was pretty cool because I always thought, hey, how does pressure get regulated when it comes to these systems, especially when you're getting from a main water supply or a water pump? It's going to just come gushing out. This is the pressure regulator that's part of the irrigation system. It reduces water pressure from the standard flow to a low volume. It prevents pipe and emitter rupture, and it's located after the filter before the distribution tubing. So huge, very important key piece of the distribution system for your irrigation, for your micro irrigation, because you don't want those emitters and or distribution tubes to implode or explode from the pressure itself. So definitely need this as a part of your irrigation system. So drip line irrigation, pressure compensating to ensure consistent flow from beginning to end. Its clog resistant design prevents root intrusion and also adds spot emitters for plants or containers that need more water. So basically drip line irrigation kind of speaks for itself. And I believe in the next slide, we'll talk more about this, but you've got different types from PVC or poly. Drip line irrigation allows you to have that flexibility that we were mentioning earlier, that you can move in or about your landscape for it to give that proper water it's needed directly to the roots. So this is one method, or pretty much the distribution system that we have here for micro irrigation.
Right. And so like once these succulents are established, we can even just move this to a whole different part of the garden that they won't even need this. So it's just very efficient in that way.
And some examples are some of the components of distribution tubing. You got your 1/2 inch poly tubing, your 3/4 inch poly tubing, hose end to poly, and PVC to poly adapters. So if you do mix and match certain components like of your distribution system from PVC pipe to poly, depending on your landscape, or you're looking for more of a fixed or versus a flexible kind of nature, you have those adapters in place that will allow you to pretty much have both components to that distribution system. And some additional micro irrigation components that we have here: hole punch and goof plugs, which I thought was pretty funny if you ask me. Stake assembly and misters and drip emitters. So stake assembly and misters basically allow you to have the distribution of those tubing, or the distribution of the tubing. Drip emitters allow you to, once installed using the hole punch and goof plugs, allow you to control how much is going to be dripped out onto your landscape. So very important components when it comes to your distribution through your distribution tubing for your micro irrigation.
Yeah, and it is just so convenient to be able to pop in a hole, put in, your little stake assembly, pop it right in where you need it. And then that plant is established and good to go. You can plug that hole and move it somewhere else where you're trying to establish something else. So it really is just very versatile and convenient. And these types of parts and pieces really lend itself. So you just use this to poke a hole in the tubing, set up your, little misters, and if you want to move it, you just plug the hole back up. It's very efficient.
Absolutely. So here we have drip line or tape available with various spacing or emitters, also available in spaghetti tube size. Drip applies 1 inch of water in an hour. So very similar to the distribution tubing. This one right here is basically a different type, or allows you to utilize that drip line to provide access to the roots of your landscape. And it also applies 1 inch of water in an hour. So basically meeting the demands or what your plant needs in a longer period of time than regular irrigation would provide.
Yeah, and like we said at the beginning, the loss of evaporation to evaporation is really non-existent here. So, you can even utilize this system at the height of the day, and because it's not creating a mist that's going over the landscape, the evaporation is quite nominal and going directly to that root zone.
So microjets or sprays, many patterns of 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 360, and different types are available on the market. Some, brands such as Rainbird or Orbit, these would carry these types of microjets or sprays, or even bobblers or emitters as well. It very much varies as to when it comes to your landscape. So you definitely want to take a look at your landscape as a whole and see what's going to be the most effective spray pattern that's going to apply to your landscape. Keep in mind, when it comes to microjets and sprays, sometimes, especially with wind factoring in, some of it might get lost when it comes to evaporation because of the wind. So you definitely want to pick and choose how much of your micro irrigation system consists of these microjets and sprays. So as mentioned earlier, so basically you can use it for large groupings of plants with similar water needs, misting of new bedding plants and vegetables. Some of the advantages: emitters available in a large variety of spray patterns, easily moved to new locations, and also easy to tell if the emitter is clogged. Microsprays can be used for all soil types. And then the disadvantage, like I mentioned earlier, water sprayed into the air may be subject to wind drift and or evaporation. So a lot of advantages when it comes to using these, but that one disadvantage could also cause you to lose some water when it comes to wind drift and evaporation.
Yeah, and it's still going to be nominal compared to our pop-up sprayers, our rotors, or in our traditional irrigation. And then just another point on our little heads here. So if you have an emitter that is clogged, you can easily just take it off and usually kind of use a little safety pin or something like that to declog it. It's very easy to flush that and then pop them right back in.
So drip emitters, as we were mentioning earlier with the goof plugs and the distribution tubing itself, they're used for precise applications such as potted plants, hanging plants, or where plant materials are spaced apart. Some of the advantages involve easily being able to move to new locations. Like Tina was mentioning earlier, one of the cool things that's flexible with this system is you can plug it, redo a new hole in the system, and then plug that emitter back in. Pressure compensating drip emitters provide a uniform flow rate. So with that adjuster on top, you can control exactly how much water is being distributed to those potted plants or a specific landscape. Some of the disadvantages that do come with it, though, is it is difficult to determine if emitters are clogged or if the tubing is kinked. So there's one thing you have to keep in mind, especially when you're doing your checks and balances when it comes to your irrigation system. You want to definitely take a look at those emitters a little more closely to make sure that they're not clogged and you're just overseeing that fact. And then you got flush valves used to flush the system of algae debris and or mineral deposits. So one thing that you can do if you're unable to determine the water quality or make any tests of the water that you're receiving, but you are getting those clogs in your system, definitely want to do those routine flushes, especially if you're using an end cap, and which we'll cover more, I think, later in the presentation, that you can allow the system to flush out any of those deposits that might formulate routinely so that you don't have any clogging and or issues within your micro irrigation system. And this is what I was mentioning earlier, hose end cap. It crimps the tubing, stopping the water flow. And this can then be removed to allow for system flushing. So when you get to that point that you're doing your routine, checks and you're flushing to prevent any deposits forming or clogging, pretty much want to use one of these in order to remove that crimp, allow the pressure to flow through, and which will allow you to do that routine flushing that you need for your system. So modifying an existing system, I'm actually going to go ahead and pass this back over to my partner, Tina, she will explore more on modifying a current existing system.
Thank you so much, Abraham. Yeah, it's so easy, like that last slide with the crimping. You can even extend the system at that juncture. They have kind of menders where you just mend it back to another hose, and as long as the pressure is suitable, you can even extend it right there. It's just so easy. So to modify an existing system, if you have an in-ground irrigation system, you want to, usually those are about a 1/2 inch. And so you'd have your 1/2 inch male thread, your existing PVC, and then connect a 1/2 inch poly tubing to the locking collar side of the fitting and run the poly through your landscape. So attaching either side of your micro stake, assembly and running it out from there. But essentially you just kind of get a 1/2 inch and convert it right over. And then once you have that conversion, then you, the rest of the system is essentially just micro. So, you could be running this from like a hose bib, which is perfectly fine and suitable. But if you have an in-ground system, then this would be the way to go, the option to retrofit. So you'd want to pick where in the system that you want to do that conversion. And then from there on, it would be the micro irrigation. And of course, maintenance. So, I always say Florida friendly is low maintenance. It's not no maintenance. And that really rings true with irrigation. So I know when I started my career at the UCF Arboretum, we used to call it irritation, not irrigation. And, because you have to get out there, you have to maintain it. You have to check for holes and check for leaks and check for clogs, because it can be irritating when you see your plants needing water and the irrigation is running. So, basically just adding it into your routine maintenance, your routine schedule, something that when you go outside, you give a look at. And this goes for micro irrigation or regular irrigation as well. So, you can check for maybe somebody plugged a shovel into a portion of your micro, maybe a little critter came out and chewed through it while they were trying to get some leaves or to sharpen their teeth. And, maybe there's just a leak going on. So like a degradation over time or something like that. So these are things to look for. And then also, periodically inspect your plants for signs of over or under watering, such as your leaf wilting or your changes in color. These are going to tune you into something's going on here. And then look at your soil. So you can see the soil pattern here. The system just went off and it's only covering about maybe 1/3 to 1/4 of the full area around the plant. And so we really need to do some enhancements here that we're not putting enough water down if the soil is this dry and it's running. So you might need a few extra, holes in the system or, sprayers or what have you. Adjust those emitters or controllers as necessary. So like we talked about, plants grow and they are growing quickly right now, right? With our 90-degree weather and our rains every day, the plants are thriving. And so we need to adapt our irrigation as they do such. And then finally, we want the whole root zone to have coverage is preferable. However, at least 50% is really needed. And so you can see here on my bottom picture, this is, kind of a drip irrigation that has been kind of raised and in between, and we might need to kind of move that a little bit. So, people can walk through and kind of kick them and stuff like that, because these are generally above ground. And so you can bury them, you can mulch over them, but if they're, visible, then they also can be, moved around. And so just checking those over time. And then again, inspecting and cleaning your filters. Filters are going to be a good friend on these little systems. And then your emitters, you can just pop those off and usually get a little safety pin and clean those out. And you want to do it on a regular basis. So couple times, seasonally, if you're using the system a lot, check it out. Flush that system quarterly to discharge any debris like Abraham mentioned, and then reset your irrigation controller seasonally to adjust the changes in plant needs. So during our December, when it's, in most of the state, South Florida would be an exception, but most of the state, things are starting to go dormant. North Florida, Central Florida, we don't need as much water because the roots aren't actively growing. They're not actively flowering and blooming. And so we can really cut back our water to once every 10 days in Central and North Florida. And that's, again, if we don't get a rain. If we get a rain, it can go even longer. So just something to think about as you adjust your irrigation. And one thing that I really, really like is for my irrigation system at home, we do have some micro, but we also have an in-ground for the turf area. And we utilize a smart irrigation controller that's actually linked to my smartphone. And those are really savvy these days. They pull in the local weather data and they adjust the water and irrigation needs as needed. So that's really the future of irrigation. So at this point, you might be wondering, how can I get micro irrigation? It just really seems like a great fit for my landscape. I want to install it in my landscape beds. And I think that's one thing we didn't mention is really, this is not recommended for turf. For turf, depending on the size of the turf, the square footage, you want to shy away from micro irrigation. It's not going to provide enough coverage. But with your landscape beds, your vegetables, your trees, shrubs, everything else, it's a great fit. And so you can get it through your local professional irrigation company. A lot of times our landscaping companies might also offer irrigation services. And here in Seminole County, for those of you in Winter Springs and Oviedo and other places, we have our Seminole County Utilities with Abraham that customers actually, and customers only, so it's not all of Seminole County, but those that are customers with Seminole County Utilities can actually have a free irrigation evaluation, and it's paid for by the utility. So definitely take advantage of that. And then we also have the WaterSense has developed guides for homeowners to install their own micro irrigation systems. So if you need a little extra support, we'll also put this link in the chat and send it by follow-up so that you can have that information. And Abraham, I don't know if you want to just chime in and tell us more about those two items.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So as Tina mentioned, when it comes to our Seminole County utility customers, we do provide a free irrigation evaluation through our third-party contractor, Cato Environmental. Basically, we've been in contract with them for the past 10 years and have a very high trust in their expertise when it comes to irrigation. They come out, provide that evaluation, take a look, and also include a free repair or installation of a rain sensor to your current irrigation system. Now, if you're not a Seminole County utility customer, that's okay. Don't fret, because you can still reach out to Cato Environmental or any one trusted irrigation company of your choosing. A lot of them, especially if they're certified, that's one of the biggest things that you want to look for, will have the up-to-date knowledge and expertise when it comes to what needs to be, installed or implemented into your landscape to have your water needs met, as well as to help you conserve water for your utility bill. So if you're a Seminole County utility customer, definitely reach out to me and I will get you more than happy to set up with Cato Environmental so we can get you that free irrigation evaluation to help you optimize your irrigation systems. And also, as Tina mentioned, the WaterSense has developed guides for homeowners to install their own micro irrigation systems. So if time be it, during this presentation, I'll be more than happy to pull up a PDF format or version of what the micro irrigation system composes of. Basically, if you're a homeowner and if you got some time on your hands, you can very much do it yourself or DIY, install your own micro irrigation system with a couple of visits to Home Depot, Lowe's, get the parts that you need, or even Rainbird or Orbit, whoever you choose, and very, very much start your way on implementing your own irrigation system.
Yeah, and check with your local municipality, check with your local utility company. they might offer something for free. So it might be, a rain sensor. It might be an irrigation evaluation. You just never know. So reach out to them and let them know that you're interested in saving water and if they can offer that to you. So definitely something to check with. We have a lot of great utilities in this state, and a lot of them do offer incentives like that. So everyone should be, converting to micro irrigation. Like I said in the beginning, we have the Central Florida Water Initiative has predicted the Florida aquifer to deplete by 2050. And so, we can see here in the Florida aquifer, we have our springs, we have lakes and various parts like that we're going to see a depletion, and we want to really start conservation is where we're focusing, and conservation in our landscapes is paramount as relates to water. So it's better for our plants and it's better for our environment. So definitely consider micro irrigation today. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Yi-Lin so she can tell you about the survey and ask any questions that we might have.
Thank you so much, Tina and Abraham. I think I heard some feedback, huh? Yeah, thank you so much. That was very informative. I think it's a lot of terms. So if you're new to micro irrigation, you may wonder, because I remember the goof plugs. I don't think I can forget that. So, but also it's like what's emitter or what's some bubblers. So if you wonder these questions, I saw a Q&A question. So just will let you know, I will share this presentation with you all after this webinar, and you will also get a link to the recording. So you can watch that again, get yourself familiarized with the terms. I also put in the chat box with some additional resources. So Tina mentioned a smart controller. So I put a link there and additional micro irrigation resources. With that, let's start Q&A. I saw some questions. So the first question is about the emitters. How do you determine the number of emitters you can put on one line depending on the diameter and the length of the distribution tubing and the volume of the emitters?
Yeah, so it's really going to depend on the pressure of the system. And as long as you're using that pressure regulator, then you want to start to think about the type of plants that you're watering. So are we establishing a new landscape with lots of young plants that are going to be thirsty for water? Or is this an established landscape with, lots of, little, maybe a few annuals are in there that we're trying to irrigate? So, kind of thinking about the amount and the type of species of plants that you're servicing. And there's no real general rule of thumb. I mean, I guess it's probably about 1 to 2 feet between, emitter and where you actually puncture the tubing to be able to put in a little micro sprayer or a bubbler, emitter, or whatever have you. And so, probably general rule of thumb, 1 to 2 feet, but it can really vary. There's no real requirement there.
Then I have a follow-up question to that. I think they may be wondering the same question. How do we know how much water does that plant need? Any resources, like give them the rough estimation, like how many gallons they need?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know UF-IFAS does have really good recommendations for that. And the general rule of thumb is if you're establishing new plants, you're going to need to water every day. And they're going to need, at least an inch or so of water, several gallons to get established. And then tapering off after about 30 to 60 days, depending on what type of plant. When we're establishing new trees, we might want to bump it out to 3 months so that they're really getting what they need. But then we're also thinking about the time of year. Is it raining every day? And, the rain, again, coming back to the beginning of our presentation, the rain is going to help establish new plants, nourish old plants, and all that. So we want to take all those factors into consideration because each site is really very unique.
Great, thank you. Another question here is, I just read it, but I'm not sure it's what that means. Can you use a well pump with the micro irrigation?
Yes.
Yes.
So they're asking, they must be on well and not city water or county water or whatever municipal water. They are on their own well. And so it could be an irrigation well, it could be a irrigation water drinking well, everything for their house. And yes, you can. You just want to, you know, make sure that the pressure is calibrated to do so, and it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, that's
You want to also definitely check and utilize a filter because, you know, if you're having, well, you might have more particulates because with the city and the municipal supply, they're going to be really combing out any particulates, but with a well, you're not, you know, you definitely want to filter that.
It will definitely help if you got additional filters. I saw one system personally that has 2 backflow preventers, as well as airway passage to release some pressure that you might receive with a well pump. So definitely want to make sure that if you can, to answer your question specifically, but you want to make sure you have the proper components necessary to filter out any of those sediments or whatnot that, you know, through a utility company, through county or city or whatever, will filter out more and through their ways, which as with you, it's going to rely more on what you have in your current system.
right. That's, I was wondering if the question was talking about directly connect from the well, because directly, just like Abraham said, you need the right components and also make sure the pressure is correct. So the next question is there such a thing as a pressure booster?
No.
Never heard of one. It's a good
Never heard-
idea, but the only thing I can think of is if you get smaller tubing, that would then probably increase the pressure a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you're just gonna have to go with, if you're on municipal, you know, running at times that other people aren't running it. So maybe like, you know, just other times of the week, other times of the day that people aren't running theirs, you might get a little better pressure. If you're on your own well, then you need to just look at your own system to see about increasing that pressure. Abe, do you have anything to add there?
You hit it the nail right on the head there. Apologize. It looks like I'm getting some unstable connection notices there, but if you can still hear me, basically it all depends on, you know, if you, I'll use Seminole County Utilities as an example. Basically the pressure that you have is regulated through our water treatment plants. If you're on reclaimed water, there are certain shortages or notices that go on throughout the day. So it all depends on what time. If there's a lot of people that are pulling directly from the water treatment plants, it's going to regulate your pressure a little lower than normal. If you are pulling directly from a well, that's going to very much depend on your system as to how much pressure you want or how little you want. And through that, you can do it yourself or through a contractor, however you go about it. But to answer specifically that question, if there's a pressure booster, not to my knowledge, there's a pressure regulator, as we talked about in the presentation, but not a booster to my knowledge at this time.
Yeah, and just as a side note, we are having some severe weather outside, our normal afternoon 3 o'clock storm. And I'm sure Abraham, you know, we're not too far from each other. So hopefully we don't lose you, Elin.
Yeah, that's at one point, you and Abraham both got a little bit like just blurry, the images. I wondered if there's a storm. So you just confirmed that.
Yep.
And I saw
outside the window now.
Oh, I hope you can still stay on. We have 10 minutes left, and we have one question just came in. Before I read this question, I saw a hand up. So if you can put your question in the Q&A, that will be great, because this webinar setting, it's that's the only way we can communicate. Okay, so my question was, how do you determine the limit of emitters that a line will support not much water the plants need. The pressure is limited to 25 psi by the regulator. But you cannot put an unlimited number of emitters on one line, because the more emitters you put on, the less pressure and volume you get from each one.
Yeah, so I can't answer this question because I don't know what the situation is, but I can tell you how to. So what you want to do is install the micro, put in your first emitter, check the pressure, put in another emitter, turn it on, check the pressure, put in another one, check the pressure, and so on. And if you get to a point where you feel like the system is starting to show a little bit signs of issues there, then that's when you'd want to stop and put the end crimp in there. So, you know, generally, I think as a general rule of thumb, it's probably under 15, and then you're going to create a new zone, a new line. And so, you know, just each one's different. Again, we have different pressure, different plant needs, things like that. So I would just, as you're installing the system, start at the beginning, put in the emitter, and check it each time that you install a new one.
I didn't unmute myself. Thank you, Tina. So it's more like a trial. So you play around and figure out the right amount of emitters and the right pressure for that particular tubing.
Yeah, because like I said, each size, you know, tubing size plays into it. The types, if you're doing an emitter that's, you know, all the way around versus just a 25%, you know, so all that factors into the amount of water that is available in that size of the pipe, and, you know, at the end of the line and things like that. So
also factoring in if you have a pressure controlling emitter, that might also factor in. So if you get those specialized emitters that you can control the pressure itself, might even give you more of an idea as you're installing them. Like Tina said, trial and error, exactly to regulate how much pressure it's going through the distribution line.
Those are super handy and super cool, because you can literally really open it up so it's soaking an area, and then as the plants grow, you start to ratchet it down, or just turn it off, you know, move it away. Just so handy.
That sounds like a fun gardening project. So if any of our attendees, you would like to try irrigation and you try the irrigation, we would like to see a picture of that. So please send me a picture of your micro irrigation. One question didn't ask, but I was asked that question a lot. So for the drip irrigation, should we put it under mulch or just above mulch?
It really depends. I would say visually, whatever your preference is, and just logistically, whatever makes sense. Obviously, the stakes are not going to be able to be mulched because they're, you know, 6 to 8 inches high. But, you know, if you want to mulch over top of it, that's perfectly fine. You know, in some instances, it might be a trip hazard. So just make sure if it's close to a pathway that it's secured. There's also nice little landscape ties. And so these are about this big, and they look like this, and you just put them right over the irrigation and it holds them into the earth. So it's just a little U shape. It looks like a big staple that you stick into the ground, and that helps secure it into the ground. And then again, you can mulch or whatever you like.
Also, I think it depends on the situation. I've read that if you've got critters chewing through your lines or anything of that sort, sometimes underground is a lot better than overground, because it still provides the same delivery. It just gets out of sight, out of mind, so the animals don't get to it or anything, you know, interfering with your distribution system.
Excellent. So I think some attendees probably already itchy to try their micro irrigation. So I will just stop here on top of your YouTube's internet getting a little bit unstable. So we will just stop here, and just want to let you know next week is our last webinar of this whole series. So for those who you want to hire landscaper, you already hire landscaper. So what you need to ask them, like those ins and outs of hiring a professional landscaper. So if you haven't registered, I put a link also in the chat box to the whole page, Irrigation Orientation. You can find the registration link. So we hope to see you next week. And also give special thanks to Tina and Abraham. It was very informative, and it sounds like a very fun garden project. So again, if anyone here, you tried your micro irrigation, please send us pictures. We always want to see some pictures of your gardens. So with that, I appreciate all your time and enjoy the rest of your Thursday afternoon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful,
Thank you. And I did
Thursday
chat
evening.
some upcoming classes as if anybody is interested. We have a fruit tree class and fertilization class and a native plant class coming up. So thank you for having us, Yilin, and thanks for coming, Abraham, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.